Like, this climate thing is a very rigid ideology that one must subscribe to wholesale.
Yeah.
You can't have any nuanced opinions on it, and you can't have any,
Oh,
there's
it's a
no
religion.
variation.
I'm going to write about this to some degree. I'm writing a new book. I'm out in November called We Got, cover that. But Alex Epstein, who wrote False Future, comments about this a bit. So the basic structure of the quasi-religious belief. And so this is the set of initial presumption. That's a way of thinking about it. You know, we were talking about how ideas are structured earlier. The Marxists believe that everything's about power. There's a narrative at the base of any belief system. And the climate pseudo-religion is based on characterization of nature as something like a hapless, defenseless, fragile virgin. The industrial activity of mankind is characterized as something like a rapacious, power-mad demolisher of natural virginity and beauty. And then the human being, the individual, is characterized as nothing but a devouring mouth whose activity runs contrary to the untrammeled beauty of the planet, and that supports the activity of the tyrannical patriarch. That's basically it. And so the reason that narrative has force is because it draws on underlying religious archetypes. And so to characterize the world properly, you do need to characterize the positive aspect of nature, because you have to live in something approximating a reciprocal harmony with nature. Because if you just eat everything, devour everything in your local landscape, well, then you die. So that's a bad idea. So you have to have some sense of the value of nature. If you were dropped in the jungle naked in the Amazon, you'd be dead in about 48 hours. So you also need a figure to characterize the negative element of nature, and that's completely absent from the environmental myth. That's part of what makes it pathological. And then with regard to the rapacious tyranny, let's say, well, any industrial system or any human organization can exploit the natural world to the point where that's not sustainable, and it can become oppressive and tyrannical. That's the evil king, ancient part of religious mythology going back as far back as we can chase it. So you need a representation of the negative aspect of society. It's all the pain of having to be socialized, and you have to understand that there is this oppressive element of culture. And so, but then, you should also wake up and notice that you've got the wise king too, and that means you plug in your damn toaster in the morning and the electricity works, and you go out on the street and everyone isn't rioting, and there's workmen who are knee deep in the sludge trying to keep everything going, and you're not starving to death like everybody on the planet was in 1860. And so a little gratitude for the positive end of the patriarchy is in order too, and that's completely absent in the environmental view. And then with regard to the individual, it's like, well, of course you can be a selfish, impulsive, hedonistic consumer. As a consequence of that, rape the planet. But by the same token, we're not a cancer on the face of the earth. We're not a virus that's mutating and taking out the planet, and we're not trapped in a Malthusian nightmare. And you got to give credit where it's due. And there's an element of people, of everyone, that's noble and generous and kind and productive and capable of living in a well-ordered state in something like sustainable and productive harmony with nature. You only get half that story. Now, if you have no comprehensive underlying cultural narrative, which is increasingly the case in our society, and someone offers you, when you're a teenager, half the religious story, that'll just snap you up in a second. Jean Piaget, great developmental psychologist, he called the last stage of adolescence the messianic period, the messianic state. Now, most people don't talk much about that, I think, because they don't know what to make of Piaget's claim, but he was a real genius. And he said, when you're making that transition from the group identity that you're chasing as a teenager to becoming an individual identity, you're going to be looking for a pathway that's essentially heroic. And what that pathway should be is that you identify with your culture deeply. You are socialized deeply into the traditions of your culture, but you're also capable of transcending, so then you become a culture creator as well as a disciplined member of culture. But young people need to be offered something like a vision of destiny in order to accept on the ideological front. And so the woke types come along and say, the planet's a virgin, the great father's a tyrant. You could be a hero if you just stood up to that. And the kids think, well, I'd like to do something important with my life. And so they're just caught into that immediate. But because it's a one-sided story, a one-sided religious story is an ideologize their identity. And we're very, very bad at that.